their history and conservation efforts. So you have in your mind where we're going. Hold on to questions as we go. We'll try to get to everything at the end. Alright, so as I said, this is one of those slides I don't like pronouncing things. Grizzly bears are one of the bear species. So they're Eurystus arctos. Commonly known as brown bears, grizzly bears, and Kodiak bears. I'm going to preface this right now. I might use all three. They're technically the same species, so I'm not wrong. If you look at just grizzly populations, there's not a whole lot of research just on them. So that's why we were expanding, but we are focusing down on those grizzly bears. Alright, so all bears were evolved from this giant short-nosed bear. If you can imagine, it's about twice as tall as a grizzly. We'll get to how tall they are in a moment. It was the largest land-living mammalian carnivore ever. So all the bears come from here. This is where we're done. So the grizzly bears. In my notes, I have to flip pages. They first appeared in Asia. And then they're now found commonly throughout the entire world, some places more common than others. There were at one point 58 different species of what we consider the brown bear family. That has been consolidated back down into one. So there are 3 subspecies that are commonly found in North America. I skipped one. I don't know how I did that. So there's 3 in North America. So there's the grizzly. We consider that more like interior. And then the brown bear, that are those coastal bears. And then the Kodiak bears that you think of more in Alaska on the islands up there. Again, they're subspecies. They're technically all the same, so if I say brown bear, I'm sorry. Grizzly bears are most commonly found in forests and woodlands, but you can find them in a lot of different habitats. They're one of the bears that aren't nearly as reliant on trees as you would think. You know, so when we were talking about black bears, if you were at the black bear presentation, you found they go up and down trees all the time. They get food in both places. They use the trees for all sorts of different things. You don't need to remember that for grizzlies. Meaning they also have this whole new habitat attached to them. So they can live above the tree line. They can go into places like the tundra or in the desert. And that really opens up the world for them, quite literally. Their ecological role. So again, one of those a little bit confusing points. I'll try to get this straight for you. So they are a very top predator. Grizzly bears, grr, remember we grr. They're a top predator. However, they eat mostly berries and plants.
Berries and what?
Different types of plants. So mostly roots and shoots, really young plants. So we think of predators all the time, especially those top predators, as big meat eaters. Now these guys, of course, if they find meat, they'll eat it. If they get salmon, salmon's very tasty, we all love salmon, they'll definitely do those. But their main roles in life are going to be removing carcasses that are rotting on the forest floors. They will disperse seeds, and then they will also control prey populations. So again, it's a little contradictory that their main diet is berries, but their role here is a top predator. All right, so still on grizzly diets, they are extremely seasonal. So in the springtime, they'll eat different things from the fall. Spring, we're focused on berries, roots, shoots, things that grow, because that's right when the growing season starts. However, there's not a whole lot of growth going on in a lot of bear territory. You know, if you're in the middle of Alaska, spring is not quite your growing season yet. So they tend to still lose weight during spring because there's not nearly as much food. Over summer, when food becomes a lot more plentiful, they'll move on to greens, berries, bugs, anything they can find kind of guys. And then in the fall, during spawning season, that's where we hear a lot about grizzlies and salmon feed. And you see all the really cute videos and pictures all over YouTube. Go find them. But you hear a lot about salmon. And then they'll also, much like our bald eagles, go for gut piles and wounded animals, easy food. Alright, so we're going to go through a year in the life of a grizzly. Like I said, they're very seasonal animals. So the seasons correspond to different activities for them. So if you can pretend that you are a grizzly for a second. It's going to be about 5 slides versus a second. So in spring, your year starts. We're emerging from our dens. Most likely you're all alone in your den. And you emerge at different times. So males come out first. They're generally in their den an average of 131 days. Wow. Guys, you got it lucky. So you come out first, mid-March kind of time. And then females that are either alone or have an older set of cubs. So cubs stay with mom for about those first 2 winters. So if you got 1 or 2-year-olds with you, you come out next. And that is between late March and mid-April with an average of 151 days. So about 20 days later. However, then you have those new moms who just gave birth over hibernation, and they're going to come out absolutely last in mid-April through early May, denning for approximately 171 days. Now, one fun thing I find, all of those ended in a 1. Science is doing something to us. When you wake up and you emerge from your den, you're still kind of in what they call this walking hibernation. So you're not eating yet, you're not kind of peeing or pooping, you're not doing much of anything, you're wandering around and hoping that you wake your body back up. So there's the kind of the stereotype of if you poke a bear, it's going to turn around and bite you. They might turn around and very sleepily be like, but that's okay, don't go poking bears. It's not fun. Alright, so you're out of your den. Did I skip something? So summer, food is coming back, kind of no matter where you are at this point. You've been eating for a while, you're fully woken up again. So these bears, although typically are crepuscular, over summer we tend to have more diurnal activity. Really nice vocab words in there for you. And then, of course, because there's a lot of food, I don't have to spend 90% of my time finding it. If I want, I can spend all day napping. Stay away from the heat, not do much. However, the main activity over summer is going to be finding a mate. Very nicely acted for Valentine's Day right now. But over summer, we're going to be finding a mate, which is actually much harder for you boys out there. Girls, you got it made here. So we found our mate, did anything we wanted. We'll get to reproduction later. Maddie's got that one. Autumn comes around, food levels change. So remember from summer when we were eating mostly berries, roots, shoots, bugs, greens, fun things. Fall is when we're going to turn back over to if there is a salmon crop around where you're staying, fish spawning, really nice nutrient loading. So we're going to go into a hyperphagia activity level, which basically means I'm going to eat as much as possible, gain weight like no other, and drink all of the water I can. They really want to gain weight in this. They can gain upwards of 3 pounds a day. You really want to be a bear in this. And then I go through a fall transition. So once you've gained all your weight, they'll actually elect to stop eating as much. So it's not necessarily tied in towards when food becomes scarce again. They kind of know in that time period, I'm going to stop eating, going to start doing my fall transition, get rid of all the nitrogen in my body, so that I don't have that hanging around with me over hibernation. So that means I'm going to drink a lot of water and poop a lot. Alright, winter. So over winter, we're going to prepare our den, because you've got to have somewhere to hang out for those 171 days. A den is not typically what we think of, especially for the kids that we're going to be talking to. You know, they think of a den, nice big house, really big heated bubble that you can go into. Dens are approximately the size of the bear. So as you can see in this pretty dark picture that you'll see much better when you get the slides, as I'm sure everybody's has mentioned. You have a short tunnel, which you can kind of squeeze through, and then one chamber. And that is approximately how big it takes you to turn around. So bigger bear, bigger den, smaller bear, smaller den. Make sense? For mothers who are now pregnant, they will build a slightly bigger den versus just their body size. So much like when we're thinking about some of our other animals and keeping regulation of temperature, these guys really subconsciously think about that as well. So their den is built such that it keeps in all their heat. If there's too much empty space around, that's just a spot for their body warmth to escape over winter, which isn't good for them. They'll also fill the bottom of it with kind of a bedding structure, leaves, sticks, twigs, grasses, anything that they can find that might be slightly cushy. But being comfortable is not the main goal here. They're building a bedding that has holes in it. So if anybody's ever been like scuba diving and you put on a wetsuit and you're building that layer of warmth between you and the outside, that's exactly what a wetsuit does in case you didn't realize it. You're still cold. They're doing that with their bedding. So all of those air pockets in there now will be heated by their own body heat so that they're not directly on the cold ground. Most dens will collapse during spring, so they do end up rebuilding one every year. And of course, once you have your den, you're ready for hibernation. So this is how we're ending our year as a bear. Hibernation is the time where you're not going to eat or drink. You're also not going to urinate or defecate. You're going to gain muscle mass. Does that sound really fun? You go to bed and you gain muscle mass? Who wants to be a grizzly bear? Yeah. All right, so we'll talk a bit about how they do that. So they're not in this, quote, like true hibernation. Their body temperature, their metabolism, their breathing rate does all drop. So they have that going for them. In that, they also form kind of a fecal, straw, hay, grass plug so they don't defecate. And they're a whole nitrogen cycling system. So I gotta read this out to you to make sure I got it. So the fat they built, they ate a lot, we built up a lot of fat. So that fat will metabolize, turn into urea. Normally they pee that out, they're not doing that right now. That urea will be broken down into nitrogen, and the nitrogen will be built back up into lean protein.
Wow.
So again, who wants to be a bear? Build protein in your sleep. All right, here's another really cool thing of why you want to be a bear. When they're gaining all of this weight and all of the fat, they don't have high cholesterol. Their arteries don't thicken like ours do. Fun bear facts. All right, hibernation, depending on where you are and what temperature it is and how much food is around, can last from like 2 days. Really short hibernation, upwards of about those 6 months we were talking about on average. All right. Maddie's going to walk you through reproduction.
Great. All right, so grizzly bear reproduction. Grizzlies are promiscuous, so a female grizzly who is receptive to mating will let it be known by leaving scent trails or scent markings on trees. She will mate with multiple males if they come around, and that also means she is going to store that sperm. So she could potentially, if she had multiple suitors, have multiple cubs in the same litter with different fathers. So mating lasts from May to July. Like Elizabeth was saying, the men have to do a lot of work because only 1 in 3 females will be receptive to mating. And that's just because of the heavy parental involvement they have once they have a cub. So once cubs are born, females won't go into estrus for at least a couple of years. So that takes a lot of those females out of the mating game, causes males to really go on the search for receptive females. They'll first reproduce between 4.5 to 10 years. That's when they become sexually mature, around 4 or 5 years old. And males will have to travel to find them. Another cool fact about their mating, similar to the black bear and our otters here, they have delayed implantation. So that means that the egg will get fertilized, but it will not implant into the uterus until hibernation. And it's just kind of a fail-safe for bears to make sure that they have built up enough fat to feed their cubs through the winter. So if mama bear, she does mate, but she just doesn't find enough food to fatten up to feed her and the cubs through the winter, that embryo will actually reabsorb into her body. She won't carry those cubs that year. She'll have to try again next year. All right, raising cubs. So cubs are born during hibernation. That's why we've got that delayed implantation. So mom will wake up about 6 to 8 weeks after she's gone into her den and birth a couple of cubs, usually 2 to 3, but sometimes 4. They're born blind and naked. They really depend on their moms. And they'll spend the rest of that denning period just fattening up, warming up next to mom. Mom will still kind of be in a sleepy, lethargic state, but she won't be asleep that whole time. And about the age of 10 weeks, these grizzlies will be about 10 to 20 pounds. And depending on where they live, what latitude, that'll depend on when they come out of their den. All right, raising cubs. They're so cute. Grizzlies stay with their moms for about 2 to 3 years, which is why, like I said, those moms don't go through estrus for a couple of years, just because it could be dangerous for the cubs if receptive males were to try to compete for her while they're around. And by their first year of life, they'll reach about 150 to 200 pounds. So that's about where our Oakland Zoo cubs are right now. They're currently hibernating, just finished kind of their first year of life, so they're getting pretty big. And like I said, they'll mature around 4 to 6 years of age, but grizzlies don't stop growing until about the age 10 or 11. So even when they're mature, they still have a lot of growing to do. Back to Maddie.
All right. So we're going to quickly hit some of the highlights on grizzly bear adaptations so that you can start to talk about them, know them, recognize them, and not confuse them for one of the other bears. All right, so grizzly bear versus a black bear. This is the confusing point that happens most often. Are all black bears black?
No.
Are all grizzly bears grizzled?
No.
Anybody know what grizzled actually means?
No.
I got a couple hands. Alright, so there are differences between the grizzly bears and the black bears. The main ones that we want to point out, because I'll get to some on the next slide. Grizzly bears have this hump between their shoulders that the black bears do not. Their paw prints are different, so if you're just seeing evidence of a bear, you can also see the difference in there. Grizzly bears have that line that goes and separates all of their fingers from their pad, versus the black bear doesn't actually do that. And we have paw print biofacts for you to look at and explore as well. Let's see. Grizzly bears are much larger than black bears, so if you see 2 full-grown adults next to each other, they're easy to recognize, but it would be difficult with those younger ones. A full-grown adult grizzly can be about 3 to 5 feet tall when they're standing on 4 legs, and upwards of 8 feet, I'm not even going to try, I'm not 8 feet tall, when they are standing up. They live up to around 20 to 30 years in the wild, 50 or so in captivity. And the really quick highlights that I'll hit on the next slide as well. Grizzly bears have a dish-shaped face. Don't ask me to say that one fast. They have small rounded ears and that shoulder hump we pointed out. They do all range in color. So grizzly bears, much like black bears, can be anywhere from black to blonde. They also have this unique, quote, grizzled look. It's kind of like when you highlight your tips. You know, you see teenagers, celebrities on TV and such, and they have highlights just on the tips of their hair. It's kind of what the grizzled expression looks. So they have blonde tips just on the end, and that's the second guy. So to point them out more clearly, the black bear has those really big ears in comparison to his face versus our short little round ears on the grizzly bear. That's our first picture. And then the second set of pictures shows you that straight face of the black bear, and then the absolute farthest image from me is the grizzly bear, and has kind of that dish face, that extra wrinkle of skin that comes around his face.